Thanks, Terry, and great to see everyone here this morning. I do apologise for those Kiwis and interstate people who've flown in to Sydney. We are looking pretty good out there, but it does look a little bit better when it's a complete sunny day, but we do need the rain here in Sydney. Guys, we've got a pretty jam-packed session today, and I think certainly today's opening session is really going to set the tone for the rest of the day. And again, this session fundamentally could be really, by the end of it, you could either want to slit your wrists or really see the opportunity that exists. And I think all four panel members are really seeing the opportunities that exist within the profession. We were talking a little bit earlier about the pace of change, and ILTA has just been on in the US, and certainly some of the feedback from the panel is that the rate of change coming out of the US is quite significant. So again, the fact that the US is doing stuff, I think it only means a positive thing for the profession here in Australia. Just a quick intro of everyone, and I won't go into everyone's bio specifically. On my immediate left here, we've got Nicola Atkinson, and she's the Research Fellow for the Centre of Legal Innovation. Marcus McCarthy, Principal of Nexus Law, and a person who is just hiding behind that hashtag there. And so again, as Terry mentioned earlier, if you'd like to tweet away or mention anything on any other socials, CLI, AIS18 is the hashtag. Caryn Sandler is a partner and Chief Knowledge and Innovation Officer from Gilbert Tobin. And great to see another tall person, James Odell, who's the Managing Director for Australia and Asia Pacific for Elevate Services. Please welcome the panel this morning. Guys, we might kick off, and Nicole, because the mic's directly in front of you, we might start with you if that's okay. Sure. Again, like any good legal conference, it's really, I suppose, good to understand how we define AI. Obviously, AI is a pretty broad term. In your words, I suppose, how would you go about defining AI?
Okay, so it is working. Look, for me, artificial intelligence is really, hi Carl, it's a collection of technologies that enable machines to deliver, or perform functions that otherwise would require intelligence in human beings. So for me, it's I think about it as a group of technologies that are constantly evolving, things like machine learning in particular, natural language processing, deep learning, neural networks, etc. But it's not the what that's important, it's really the how. It's really about what these different things are able to do, and I think we can get a little obsessed with what it actually is. The important thing is how we're using it in our businesses.
And Marcus, your take on AI?
Well, I think artificial intelligence is very ill-defined, and there's nothing out there that really tells us what it really is, and there's no real definition. There's a science fiction, piece around what artificial intelligence is, and whenever we refer to artificial intelligence, I think that springs into people's mind. What it really is a bunch of sort of 4 or 5 things that technologies and software that work in a particular way. And I think it needs to be sort of more fulsomely or more accurately defined so people can get a handle on it. As a thing in the industry, artificial intelligence is kind of a furphy as a name. It's not intelligence, it's at best the emulation of intelligence, or probably the emulation of pretty ordinary intelligence. So I think what it can do is really interesting, but it is not what what science fiction might say it is, and it's certainly not, in the future of the death of lawyers is hinged to it. But so I think it's worthy of sort of exploration and proper definition.
So James, you come at this panel probably from a slightly different angle in terms of the supplier into the industry. Your business is really about enabling law firms, in-house counsel, etc., and obviously providing some outsourcing opportunities around that legal tech. How do you define AI?
Well, I think for starters, AI is much less than you think it is. and it is much less widely used than the hype would suggest. So that's the first thing to note. As Mark has said, we have been replacing intelligence with machines for hundreds of years. There is no magic in the step that we have taken to create AI. It is just something that is even more difficult for us to understand, and therefore we impart this kind of magical, almost godly definition on it. So, but there is no magical step that has been imparted here. I think for us, AI is about, forgive me, I'm an engineer, so my mind works in a certain way. It's about the statistical analysis of data sets and critically a feedback loop, which causes the output of a system to influence the input of a system and how those inputs are processed. And as I say, that has been going on in one way or another for millennia, from the printing press, and way back before that.
And Caryn, if I can sort of take the conversation in a slightly different direction, in terms of what's happening in legal tech and innovation generally, is that the tip of the iceberg, or is there really more going on underneath that we're not really talking about or seeing?
So I think, everyone is very concerned around legal tech and innovation within the actual industry. I think if you actually pare that back, technology is just a solution. Technology is purely a means to getting, more efficient legal service delivery to clients or the like. I think probably what we need to unpack over here is why are clients actually asking for this particular technology to be utilised? What is actually driving that? I think there are a variety of reasons for that. I think we are seeing an evolution in the broader landscape. So we've got far more competition. There are far more players within the Australian market. Not only legal players. We've got adjacent professions that are actually sort of playing within the industry as well. And I think what we're seeing within clients, and I can certainly speak for in-house clients, is demands on them are increasing as well. And as a result, they are not only being seen as sort of legal advisors, they are also being seen as strategic advisors for the actual business. So in keeping with that, I think it is absolutely critical for any legal advisors who are sort of advising their clients to also, change and deliver that sort of step change to enable their clients to actually support their business sort of properly. So I think that is why we're seeing a lot of pressure from our clients to the external law firms or the like. It's sort of, that is what is driving that. They're looking for solutions, which means that they can actually deliver. They're under budget pressures, they're under cost pressures. So then technology just becomes a means to getting there. I see that as no different, whether it be AI or any other legal tech, I see that as no different to just trying to resolve a problem or an issue that our clients are facing.
So James, we were talking earlier this morning, and you gave an example of some clients that you guys look after who came to you and said, if we could start again, what would we look like? Can you just talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. So I've spent the majority of my career trying to get lawyers to change, I think, essentially. First, Linklaters, I was in the internal strategy team at Linklaters in London, and then Baker McKenzie, Chief Operating Officer at Baker McKenzie, and now from sort of the outside profession in a separate company. But these particular lawyers came to me and they said, look, we are passionate about change. We believe that our law firm needs to fundamentally change. We're fed up with banging our head against a brick wall. We think that the only way to implement this change is to start with a blank canvas. If you were to build a law firm from scratch, what would it look like? And that was just a fascinating question for me. And normally we don't deal with startups. We have very large clients, but it was such an interesting question for me that I decided to spend quite a bit of time with these individuals. And so we designed what has become a law firm called Hamilton Locke. They're still quite small. They're probably 20-odd lawyers, but they only employ senior lawyers. All of their back office is offshore. They're entirely in the cloud. They have no documents. They have no document storage. Their processes are optimized because they've been designed from scratch. The proof is always in profit margins, and I can tell you, I won't tell you the exact profit margin, but it is very substantially higher than any other law firm I've ever known. And these individuals are motivated and have a sense of mission about changing the profession, and it's been just a phenomenal experience for them and for us supporting them.
And as said, like a true engineer, processes optimised. I'm sure if you went back to your own firms and had a look around, I'm not sure how many of our processes would be optimised. Marcus, in terms of going back to my original question about what's happening below the water, do you see a lot more going on in the profession rather than what makes it to events like this and industry media?
In tech, yeah, absolutely. There's a hell of a lot going on. I was speaking to Nicola about this beforehand. In fact, it's been going on for 20 years, and it's an extension of everything we see today is the same things that were around 20 years ago, extensions of things that have gone before. It's just got better and more easier to produce. And so it's more amenable to people coming into the market using those technologies to create a branded business. So, I mean, there's a few technology companies represented here today, but they are the tip of the iceberg. My feeling of it is there's a patchwork of things out there, and that's what is creating the confusion and the nervousness in the legal industry. There's so much of a wall of stuff coming, and you don't know what is the good stuff and what is stuff that's leveraging off other good stuff and what's original and what's going to really affect your practice. And I would say all of it's going to affect your practice, but quite well. There'll be great tools for us to help us be really good lawyers in the future. And it'll be a conglomeration of all those businesses. I think that's the future, is collaboration between complementary businesses that produce a good service. So, yeah, I think you can just Google legal technology and we are at the tip of the iceberg, but a lot of them are doing the same things. You can actually categorise them all, if there was a lexicon around this stuff, into about 4 or 5 things. That is, some of which is AI.
Yeah. So, Nicola, in terms of your research and obviously your history within the profession, are you seeing a level of fear or positiveness in terms of the opportunity that exists out there?
That's an interesting question. I think for young people, I think that, really seeing lots and lots of opportunities. How that's going to fit with the business model that persists in law just at the moment, and the speed of change for that business model, is possibly a threat to their engagement. But I think certainly the opportunities are there. In terms of
sorry, you talk about threat to engagement. Do you want to expand a little bit more?
Yeah, I think for young people, I think that for our junior lawyers who are not. And I come from a large firm sort of background, and I think for those junior lawyers, we're just seeing so many changes, many of them very positive, that move to sort of flexibility in the workplace, that idea of sort of bringing in freelance lawyers into large firms, so that there are lots of opportunities, but equally they can become frustrated with the pace of change in law firms in terms of uptake of technology just right now. I do think that there is such a huge amount of change. There's something like 1,800 startups just in the last 12 months in the US in the legal tech space, and the pace of change, I believe, is just going to continue to accelerate. I also think there are opportunities for young lawyers in terms of the way they are trained in firms that AI possibly offers. That's an area that I'm particularly interested in my research through the centre. So how do we develop our young lawyers? And I think AI offers us opportunities through tools like Neurologic, for example, where you can really, help to start to explicate the processes by which lawyers actually think about and arrive at their conclusions, etc., in solving legal problems. Just
out of interest, if I could ask the delegates today, just put your hand up if you classify yourself in the millennial age group. Okay, so we've probably got about 25% of the room, which is interesting in itself. The rest of us, 10 points for being here, I think, in the first place. Caryn, yeah.
Can I just add to that? So I completely agree with Nicola in that I think there are significant opportunities, and I think some junior lawyers or even graduates see those opportunities. I do think that there is a lot of concern in the industry as well. I spoke at a panel about a month ago or so at UTS, and the dominant question was, will there be a job for me? So I do think so, because if we think about what the AI technology, or where the technology is at this point in time getting quite good at, it's about those routine, frequent tasks that typically in organisations were targeted at your junior lawyers. So they are worried, well, if that is what the model might look like, and we're really talking about high value legal work, that is something that they are very, very concerned about. And then I think that raises a question for the broader legal industry as well, is how do we train our lawyers? You know, what skills do we give them to enable them? Because I certainly, when I was in practice, I cut my teeth from things like due diligence, discovery. If that is done largely by machines, how will we equip our lawyers with those tasks? So I think that is something, certainly at Gilbert Tobin, we are really thinking about what we need to do from a training perspective to enable our lawyers to have the skills to tackle tasks that otherwise they may have got in a very different way a while ago.
So Marcus, sort of taking that point a little bit further, what do you think differentiates the work of a lawyer from other professionals in the new world that is, you know, surrounded by AI and legal tech?
Yeah, and that's kind of the topic. What is the zone left for lawyers in a legal tech landscape? And that's something that I struggle with too, the future of law, and where does the margin really sit? Because in an industry, we have legal technologists in an ever-expanding field, and so how far can that go, and how much does it eat into the classical areas of lawyering? And my feeling at the moment is not very far at the moment, and even in the future a little bit further, but nowhere near as far as the hype is suggesting it is. Because lawyers in the zone that they exist, in the box of lawyering, that someone, you know, they exist in this box and they're going to stay in that box for the most part, because that is the zone of bespoke advice and humanity. And I just don't think any kind of AI system can touch that for a very long time to come. Now, of course, that legal technology will start to eat into process-driven exercises, and that is actually probably a really good thing, and it's a really good thing for access to justice as well. And this, if you think of the iceberg analogy, you know, 80% of below the waterline is low-value process-driven work, and it's totally legitimate that should be automated. To me, it's about where do you recognise that 20% line actually exists. It's always going to be there. The danger is that you overuse that line so that it creeps into an area it really shouldn't be. And I think that just organically will happen. That 20% bespoke zone will stay. So lawyers need to skill up, basically, and stay in the box they're in and become really good at it, leverage these tools, and become better at being human, if anything. Better at having good relationships with their clients and working out what the issues are and framing the question or the problem and delivering solutions. And that's the area they've always existed in, and they should bloody well stay there.
And I'll just remind people, if you hadn't seen it, there was a study in the UK earlier this year that said that 86% of people still wanted to get their legal advice from humans and not from machines, and that looked at various industries, but that was the figure for law. So I think we can take some comfort in that.
James, obviously you're an enabler to the profession. You are also potentially a competitor to the profession. How do you see it playing out in the future?
Look, I think one of the advantages of being in a relatively unevolved, backwards profession, is certainly compared to the other professions, the engineers, the doctors, the accountants, the bankers, is that you can look to the other professions and see how they evolved 5, 10, 15, 20 years ago. And you can see some blueprint there. So if we look to the investment banking sector, which is perhaps 20 years ahead of the legal sector in many ways, 20 years ago, when equity research was shifting to Chennai and Manila, and algorithmic trading was coming online, and the banks were becoming much more technology driven, there was this heartache and hand wringing about how are we going to create great bankers into the future if they don't spend their first 5 years doing detailed equity research into anonymous companies. How's this going to... The banks are more profitable than they've ever been. They are certainly no smaller than they've been, and the banking sector is thriving. There are still great investment bankers at the top of the tree. But for 20 years, their industry has changed profoundly. So I think, agreeing with my fellow panellists, the future's very bright for lawyers, so long as you don't define what a lawyer is too narrowly. I'm an engineer by training, and if a civil engineering company was populated purely by civil engineers, A, it would be extremely expensive to deliver a product, and B, they wouldn't be good at all the things that need to be done by a civil engineering company. So if you define yourself as a lawyer, as somebody who gives legal advice, then yes, your days are numbered unless you're very senior and very experienced. But apart from that, yes, your days are numbered. So it's about defining what a lawyer is, and for the longest time, if you think about if you're a lawyer about what you do in your day, a very small proportion of what you do is actually being a lawyer. I would say 90% of what you do is all of that stuff that enables you to deliver that pinnacle piece of advice, which is actually real law. So lawyers have been spending most of their day not doing law for generations, and it's that other stuff that is changing.
Marcus, yep.
Just on the note of not defining what legal service is too narrow. In preparing for this session, I was trying to work out, what is the zone of lawyers and how do we define that zone. So I went to the Legal Profession Act for the definition of legal services. And there is none. I wrote it down. It says
that's interesting in itself.
Yes, the very thing it regulates. Legal services means work done in the ordinary course of legal practice. And legal practice is undefined. So isn't that interesting? Maybe it's deliberately undefined for that reason.
And I would just say, going to James's point, which I think is true, that in many cases, I talk to people that say this large firm that I've worked at, and they'll say, there's lots of people around here who don't do any law because that can be the nature of practice, and they rely on, say, their knowledge lawyers to actually produce the law. But I would say there's also an opportunity in this new world to get back to the law. Marcus and I were talking about the challenge the universities have been going through for the last sort of 10 years, constantly asking the question of how do they produce work-ready graduates, and it's really remembering that actually that's a time when you can really understand and go deep into the principles of equity, for example, and you'll never get that chance again. And that's so to have lawyers who actually understand the law, I think in the first place is important. And I also think there's some real value that lawyers bring by understanding what is this network of relationships in which we exist. How is it that we regulate our relationships? What are rights, remedies, obligations actually mean? And we bring that to the interdisciplinary teams that will help to solve the problems of law that arise all the time. So I guess I just say, let's not necessarily stay down the track of doing all the enabling that sits around the practice of law, but let's stay with what law is also all about for those of us who went into it.
And Caryn, further to that, in order to be a successful lawyer now and in the future, do you need to be tech savvy? Do you need to understand technology?
So again, I couldn't agree more with Nicola on that, in that you really want your lawyers, particularly if we're thinking that AI and technology may disrupt some of the sort of low value tasks that typically are done, you really want to be focused on that legal work. In terms of, we at the firm ran some coding courses for our lawyers as well as our clients, and we got a lot of questions around that. Do we want our lawyers to become coders? And I think our view is absolutely not. That was not the motivation for us to make our lawyers coders. We want our lawyers to be the best possible lawyers that they can be, that they can actually apply their critical judgment to particular legal problems and come up with a particular response for the client. What we did want them to learn, though, was what technology is capable of. Because the reality is today is they are doing very many tasks that otherwise maybe technology would be better at. So if they can identify those particular tasks and they can say, you know what, I've been aware of, this particular expert logic system, or I can see that, we've done this in this particular instance, surely that one is right for automation. That is what we want. So I think it's more understanding what technology is capable of rather than actually becoming technologists. Because I think, frankly, we want them to do that one thing really, really well, which is sort of, which is doing the actual law and applying that judgment rather than actually being excellent at both. Because I think if we do that, the danger is they won't be those experts in law as well, because, they're all busy, they're all time pressed. You're going to try find some additional time to make them coders. It's not really going to work like that.
So, Marcus, for us in the room that are the in-between generation in terms of us Gen Xers, well, I'm throwing you into that mix, mate. Where do you see our careers for the next 15 years at least? Where do we head and what do we do? Because obviously, we're talking, Nicola's talking here about education and new lawyers coming through and things evolving. You've got those people who are, in their 60s plus and on the way out over time. For this middle rump, is it a difficult time for us, or is there still plenty of opportunity?
It's straight to social security for us.
Mate, I thought you were going to sell it up.
No, quite the opposite. I think there's a real need for the senior members of the profession to step up and mentor the next generation to get to our level, because I think with all of this coming online, it's actually harder for the junior lawyers to get through that mud and smoke into the zone they need to be good lawyers. And this discussion about education is a massive one amongst the universities, and I'm on the Newcastle Advisory Board for the law school, and this is a discussion we're having all the time. And it's the same question, Caroline, do we teach them coding? And ironically, here's Nexus with a restructured law firm and building a tech platform, and I'm telling them, no, don't create legal technologists. We don't need that. I need lawyers. I need legal technologists for that business, but not to run a law firm and deliver services to clients. So I think the best thing you can teach your students is to how to be really good lawyers and empathetic and capable of solving issues and understand the technology, understand what's out there, but you don't need to learn code to do that. I don't know code. The best thing they can do is understand the tools that are available to them, what is going to best service their clients, and be better human beings, if anything.
Caryn?
So just to add to that, I think, my team, for example, we are, a lot of us were previously sort of client-facing lawyers, and now we are really actively involved in sort of that intersection between legal as well as technology. But what we can do is we can come onto the particular matters, whether they be litigation, transactions, or the like, and help our lawyers use things such as artificial intelligence or look to automate particular tasks. What we are reliant on from our lawyers is to identify that actually this particular matter would be good, or we could use for due diligence, we could use the AI technology and actually contact us around that. So again, it's more about the awareness of technology, what technology is capable of, rather than actually being excellent at the technology. And frankly, that stuff is hard. So if they're going to spend, you need to immerse yourself in this on a daily basis. It changes very quickly. And if you're going to expect every single lawyer in every organisation to be across the technology and, understanding what at its core it is, and really understand, if you do this or you do that, then this is what the impact's going to be. It was rather about awareness of that technology.
I'll say one more thing and then shut up.
Yep.
It's also, a lot of this technology is about client engagement. They're tools for client engagement, because a lot of people are, don't want to necessarily deal with a lawyer directly, and they want to get a sense of where they're going before they go there. So a lot of it is about the engagement process, or the pre-engagement process actually, before it even gets to the lawyer, and that is where technology really does help. So we're using it in that sense as well. So it's good to understand that, because lawyers can learn that is an engagement process that can be done better, and it actually helps them be better lawyers.
So James, the opportunity for in-house counsel teams to evolve and strengthen, is that real, or is that still going to be driven by the law firm per se?
I think we see it's instructive to look at the differences between us and the US. In the US, the in-house buyers of legal services have progressed further and faster than in Australia. I think Australia's catching up, but the US is probably 5 years ahead of Australia. And that's really been driven by the advent of the legal operations professional, essentially a chief operating officer in-house legal teams. Once that happened, the advent of groups like CLOC, the Corporate Legal Operations Consortium, which is the collection of chief operating officers of in-house teams who all band together and share their common challenges and try and find common solutions. And what we see in the US as a result of that new profession, we see in-house teams in the US driving change much more proactively and catalysts for change much more proactively than we see here. So in the US, I guess you can characterize it as big companies have been saying to their law firms, please change, please become more efficient, please evolve. And they've been met with a wall of silence, so they've taken it into their hands to do it themselves. And they now move towards a world where law firms are one of many providers within this legal ecosystem, and the legal operations executives have to become expert project managers at bundling together again this unbundled world. So the catalyst in the US is I think the in-house teams. I think the law firms here in Australia are more innovative and more advanced than any law firms in the world, and I think that's a fantastic opportunity for those progressive law firms to stay at the centre and in an extreme sense stay relevant. If I may build on a previous comment about the development of technology in law firms and lawyers becoming coders. I totally agree that lawyers should be able to speak developer speak, but not be developers. But one of the hard realities is that, as a company that develops legal tech, it's really expensive. Building legal technology is a money pit for years. You have to chuck, you're shoveling millions of dollars into this hole of technologies which may or may not find traction, may or may not work. You need a long-term view. Law firms are 12-month views, and all the profits are distributed, and there's no retained capital. So that partnership structures are the opposite of an ideal vehicle for developing technology. So even if you did teach your lawyers how to code, the likelihood was that you wouldn't have the political horizon internally to be able to see that project through, or the capital to be able to fund it. So that's a hard commercial reality of the previous comment.
Yeah. Caryn, in terms of the in-house counsel piece, what are you seeing in your world in terms of in-house counsel teams doing it on their own, or are they all about collaboration?
So I think it's more around collaboration. I think, again, to fully understand this space where of legal tech innovation, it takes a lot of time. As I said, it changes really quickly. So I think, maybe contrary to in contrast to the US, we've got smaller organisations. We just don't have the great big organisations that necessarily you do in the US. So the teams tend to be quite smaller in Australia as well. What we are seeing then is in-house teams wanting to take advantage of the technology, wanting to understand what is happening in sort of the legal innovation space, but frankly have got such pressures internally and such budget restrictions that to do it by themselves can be quite tricky. There are certainly some organisations that have the rise of the legal operations profession in Australia, and they are definitely driving that internally within their organisations. But I think it is certainly a collaborative effort. I certainly spend a lot of my time working with our clients, understanding where their inefficiencies are internally and sort of helping them. Contract management is a really good example of this. With the increased sort of regulatory and compliance burdens faced by in-house teams, they are wanting to know what are in their contracts. They want to understand. Often they're in the top drawer of the person, or they've disappeared because they've been saved on a local computer, and somebody has left the organisation. Actually getting that together and making sure they've got a proper sort of contract management system where they understand what their obligations are is absolutely critical. So I suppose from a legal perspective or our external counsel perspective, we've got I suppose, organisational understanding of what they are actually wanting to achieve. We understand the technologies out there, and we're able to sort of partner with them to say, you know, we're going to help you put in place this contract management system, you know, identify the key obligations in your actual contracts, and help you or ensure that you actually are compliant going forward. So I think there are some really interesting ways in which external counsel can support their in-house sort of teams, and certainly we are seeing quite a lot of appetite in that space.
Nicola, if I allow you to put on your binoculars and look ahead 5 years, what do you see in the profession?
What I'd like to see is, what I think we're going to see in the next 12 months to 2 years is a lot more focus on data. In organisations, as sort of a recognition that we have data in organisations, and people really starting to think about how they use that, and that's a slightly different kind of, I guess, orientation to the world than we've had in the last sort of 2 to 3 years, when it's really been on the tech and how we can use it to increase efficiency, etc. And so I think that'll be the beginning of that next shift to how we use this technology really to help to assist our clients. So I guess, you know, for me, that's what I have been reflecting on, that the conversation, I think, over the next couple of years in firms is going to start to look quite different.
Marcus, what does your world look like in 5 years' time?
Oh, God. Well, there's definitely a shift to the technology platform, without a doubt, as a piece that is a connection piece to the firm. And the firm is a resource to that, and it is a multidisciplinary practice anyway. So, and we've built a bit of technology that originally that ran Nexus that we're going to extend to other parties too, so we can connect networks together globally. So my business has a particular focus on technology that drives all of that anyway. So the legal technologist, the operations manager becomes much more important. Non-legal professionals in the future running the business of law. The legal function does not change that much, I think. You know, those who wish to be lawyers, you know, and are passionate about that space, need to maintain that passion. So I don't see a lot of change in that, other than they might leverage some of those technologies to help start the process of what they need to do in their box. But the expectation on them is that they do their job really, really well to get to the solution that is assisted by other technologies along the way from go to whoa. So there is a lot of change in the next 5 years, and I think our business is a particular one. So in the legal profession as a whole, I think there is the opportunity of smaller firms and all firms to jump on board and use some of the technologies that are out there right now to help create automated documentation for their own businesses. We just happen to be doing our own technology for that. But if you're a law firm and you don't want to spend the money that we're doing, please don't. You're wasting your time. Just go and, you know, subscribe to Neodologic or Automio and get some things going there for you because it's all for you.
Yeah. Caryn, what do you see your firm doing in 5 years' time?
So, you know, practicing law, which is what we want them to be doing, and still involved in those very significant transactions and you know, litigations that are around in the market. I think probably something, certainly from my perspective with our team, you know, my team comprises data experts, legal technologists, knowledge managers, project managers. I think probably what we'll see is far more integration within the delivery of legal service. So when a matter comes in, when a litigation comes in, that you actually have other personnel sort of embedded within those teams delivering that legal service. Because, you know, always say that lawyers, you know, lawyers are great at delivering legal services in terms of, you know, applying their critical judgment and the like, but are they the best project managers? Maybe not. I mean, you know, we've spent a lot of time putting our lawyers through project management certifications to ensure that they are actually properly skilled to deliver large sort of litigation or large transactions. So I think certainly from my perspective and my team, far more integration with that sort of client-facing and those client-facing matters.
Champs, your business, do you see it continuing on the same trajectory, or will it be a completely different business in 5 years' time?
It won't be a completely different business, but it will be a very different business because the pace of change is so great, and we, as a business, need to continue looking for opportunities and changing as a result. I think our business is a bit of a microcosm of where the industry is moving, because we deliver people, process, and technology. So rather than being a legal tech startup or a legal tech company who will necessarily have to go to a customer and say, the answer is my bit of legal tech, we're much more outcome orientated. And that outcome might be delivered using a combination of people, process, and technology. And the fact is, even now, with all this discussion about technology and our great investment and push in technology, the majority of gains are still to be made on the people and process front of things. So a relatively small proportion of our revenue comes from technology, the greatest gains we make. So I think, building on something Caryn said, I think we'll move from talking less about the sausage machine and more about the sausage. In-house buyers of legal services are being sort of confused and dumbfounded at the moment by just this Cambrian explosion of possibilities. I think the successful companies, hopefully ours will be one, will be able to sell and deliver outcomes which are composed of people, process, and technology elements. And those elements will change at a rapid pace. So we might rotate out one bit of tech and rotate in another bit of tech that was created 12 months ago that has superseded the last bit of tech, but the sausage is still the same, and we don't have to concern our clients with that sausage machine. So I think, with this growth and complexity in our sector, and this agony over how can we possibly keep track of it all, I think professions will grow and providers will grow who do that. They are the intermediaries who keep, whether it's law firms or whether it's companies like Elevate. It'll be a complicated, difficult, and valuable profession in its own right, sorting the wheat from the chaff. And that's what we see. And it'll be different in many ways. We're growing at 40% a year. We'll probably be a listed company. Will be even more global and seamless, and in many other ways.
And Caryn, do you see in 5 years' time a change? We spoke earlier about the court system and their engagement with technology and what's happening within the profession. Do you see those organisations continually playing catch-up, or will they be a step ahead and leading the profession?
Look, I think that's
slightly contentious question, I know, but
that's a sort of perennial question. I mean, I'm not sure if any of you were at the equivalent of this last year, and Dan Hunter got up and he sort of showed a picture of what medicine looked like in the late 1800s and sort of early 1900s, and what medicine looks like today, and then it sort of fast forward and legal, what it looked like in the late 1800s and sort of early 1900s, and what it looks like today. And if you looked at the different courts, you wouldn't see very much difference. I think that is a challenge for the profession. I think, with the rise of AI, with the rise of blockchain, there are going to have to be quite considerable changes in regulation, legislation. So, whilst one may hope that AI would have a quite transformative effect on legal, or maybe some people hope it doesn't, but I think it might be constrained because one has to really think about these other angles. So I think that is going to be something to sort of wait and watch, but I think that is going to be a challenge generally for the legal profession, keeping up with how the technology is evolving, but how we can actually apply it within the legal industry.
And Marcus, do you see there being some responsibility for those leaders within the profession who get the here and now and see the future to really start lobbying governments fundamentally to invest in those opportunities for change within the courts?
Oh, absolutely. Access to justice is what the legal system is about. And I know there's a lot of companies working towards improving that. So that's one great aspect of technology coming in the pipeline, which I think we can all get on board with. And it makes our lives as lawyers dealing with the courts much easier anyway. There's a project, I think Nicola was saying, to digitise or put all legislation into code, which is Data 61 with the CSIRO. What a great thing that is. They've just announced the Australian national blockchain in combination with IBM and CSIRO. First one, as I've seen in the world, a national backed blockchain. So for me, I've been floating around that space and watching it, not really thinking it's too disconnected. Well, now it's something that could be used even in the court system. So yeah, that's good. I just want to take one more point about James said technology, that there's no money in technology.
I didn't say that.
No, I was going to reflect that, but where the technological aspect, and this is proving true and very much in our thoughts around Nexus and the open law portal which is launched, is that whatever we do with technology, it has a revenue base, of course, but the real benefit is actually for the lawyers who then do the real work. So for every dollar that we might earn through the open law portal, the plan is that there's probably $5 to $8 in real world lawyering. So that can only be a good thing, can't it, for the profession, those sorts of uses of technology. If we actually get on board and realise it's how to use it effectively, we can actually leverage it really well for our businesses, and it has great things for the court systems as well.
Nicola, just in terms of summary, and I'll open it up for question time. If you had to give one piece of advice or one message today about what the future will look like for lawyers, what would that be?
Gosh, there's so many different things that have come out of the conversation today. I think it would be look after your people, really, and I think that's it's staying as close as possible to the people in our organisations, sort of really working with them to what they're looking for from their careers and looking to develop those people and thinking about ways to do that, and perhaps that we haven't always done that as well as we could have, but that AI offers us some opportunities and the technology offers us some opportunities to do that really differently and well.
Excellent. James, I might throw it to you down the end in terms of what do you see the opportunities for lawyers in 5 years' time?
Gosh, the opportunities for lawyers in 5 years' time. I guess the most exciting thing is that probably some of the greatest opportunities I couldn't predict right now. You know, if we look 5 years back and you asked the same question 5 years ago, you know, how accurate an answer could you have given? So it's a very difficult question to answer. You know, we, in our business, our planning horizon is quarterly. So we plan every quarter and we focus on the quarter. We're not a public company, but we are, you know, we have a longer range strategy, but our real meat of it is in a quarter, because we don't know what is going to be around the corner in 12 months' time. And if you plan for it, you inhibit yourself to capitalise on those opportunities. I think, so similar to what Nicola said, I think values, and it's a kind of a wishy-washy thing to say, but I think the
from an engineer, yes.
Yeah, I know. I'm a reformed engineer. I think values will be critical, and living your values, not just sticking them on your website. But you know, in this world of tech and complexity, we are humans at the end of the day, and we, you know, thrive living a values-driven life, and you know, in our working life as well as our private lives. And I think if we lose sight of that and just go with bots and machines and dehumanize our professions too much, I think those businesses won't survive. So I'd like to see a continued or even a greater focus on values.
Caryn?
I think one thing that certainly resonates with me is there'll be greater opportunity for different careers within the legal profession. So, I'm living proof of that. You know, a traditionally sort of corporate lawyer who now leads an innovation function within the firm. So I think as we see the evolution of technology, as we see changes within the actual legal industry, I think there will be a lot of new opportunities. You know, there are a lot of new law firms, you know, Nexus, you know, these didn't exist, 10, 15, 20 years ago. It just didn't happen. So I think really good opportunities for lawyers who maybe want something different to a traditional career path. And I think certainly within 5 years, my expectation would be that we would start rethinking the business model and the billable hour as well.
Marcus?
Yep, rethink that. Oh, look, absolutely, I disagree completely that, you know, there's a lot of good change that's come, there's some more change to come. Certainly value-based pricing is already here. Again, it's been here for ages. And a lot of firms have got on board of that as a sort of a new law focus. But look, I think the future is bright for law firms and different ways to approach law, but the fundamentals of being a lawyer will remain consistent and need to, but also law within a multidisciplinary collaborative space. So I think that's probably the change in the next 5 years, is the lawyers looking at other industries like accounting that have done the same thing will start to realise that you know, lawyering is just one function, and we need to connect to other businesses and clients and in-house counsel more effectively.